That day, I realized my son didn't just marry a cruel woman, he became one himself. They both sat there, mocking the will I'd written by hand. They thought I was too old to notice their smirks, but I'd written something they could never see. My name is John Whitaker. I'm 62 years old, a retired high school teacher, and a widower for almost a decade now. I've lived long enough to see the best and worst of people, and sometimes both in the same face. I used to believe family was unbreakable, that no matter how hard life hit us, the bond between a father and his son would hold. I don't believe that anymore. The day of the will reading started like any other, with the sun spilling through the lace curtains of my small living room. I sat quietly, sipping black coffee, listening to the morning birds on the porch. My hands trembled a little, not from fear, but from the weight of years. I wasn't nervous about what was coming. I'd been waiting for this moment. The lawyer, Mr. Adams, was an old friend of mine, someone I'd known since he was a young associate handling the paperwork for my first house. He had gray hair now, and glasses perched on the edge of his nose. When he called the meeting, he already knew what was in the will. He also knew exactly what kind of people would be walking into that office. They arrived late, of course. My son, Mark, wearing an expensive watch I'm certain he didn't buy himself, and my daughter-in-law, Lisa, trailing behind in her sharp red dress and colder smile. They didn't greet me. Lisa only looked me up and down as if I were a piece of old furniture. Mark gave me that forced grin he always used when he wanted something. "Dad," he said, his voice polished but empty, "you didn't have to make this so formal. We could have handled this as a family." I smiled, but I didn't speak. That's something you learn with age. Silence can be louder than shouting. We took our seats around the mahogany table. The office smelled faintly of leather and old books. Lisa crossed her legs, her heels tapping impatiently. Mr. Adams cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began reading. "I, John Whitaker, being of sound mind and body," he started. Lisa chuckled softly, whispering, "Sound mind, that's debatable." Mark tried to shush her, but even he laughed under his breath. My jaw tightened, but I didn't move. I kept my eyes fixed on the window behind the lawyer, where sunlight danced across the curtains. Let them laugh. They had no idea what was coming. As Adams read the smaller details, a few heirlooms, the watch I wore during my wedding, my late wife's piano, Lisa leaned toward Mark. "So, what's left? The house? The account? The land? Don't tell me we're wasting our time on sentimental junk." She said it loudly enough for me to hear. I looked at her then, really looked. She was everything my wife Eleanor wasn't. Sharp-tongued, materialistic, and empty behind the eyes. I often wondered how my son could have fallen for her. Then again, love makes fools of all of us, doesn't it? When Mr. Adams reached the midpoint, Lisa interrupted. "Can we just skip to the inheritance? We all know that's why we're here." She laughed, turning to me. "Don't take it personally, John. You've had a good run." I smiled, calm and slow. "Yes," I said softly, "I suppose I have." Mr. Adams raised a brow, then continued. His voice was steady, but I could hear the faint edge of amusement. He'd been waiting for this, too. He knew what was hidden near the end of that document. As they kept smirking and whispering, my mind wandered back to how we got here. It hadn't always been this way. I remembered Mark as a little boy, running through the backyard barefoot, his laughter filling the summer air. He used to help me fix things around the house, asking endless questions about how things worked. "I'll be just like you one day, Dad," he'd say. I used to believe him. But people change when money enters the picture. After Eleanor passed, Mark distanced himself. He said he was busy, that life in the city was demanding, that Lisa didn't like small-town weekends. I saw through it. He was embarrassed by me, by my simple clothes, by my slow country ways. And Lisa, she didn't just dislike me, she despised me. She called me stubborn, said I was holding Mark back. I overheard her once telling him, "When he's gone, we'll finally live free." That memory still burns. Back at the table, Mr. Adams cleared his throat again. "As for the remainder of my estate," he read, "including the family home, the savings accounts, and all material assets." He paused and looked over the rim of his glasses. Lisa sat forward eagerly. Mark's smirk widened. I didn't move.
I already knew what came next. Shall be distributed according to the following clause, which I've chosen to keep private until this moment. Lisa rolled her eyes. Oh, please, dramatic much. That's when Adam smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was the smile of a man who'd been holding in laughter all morning. He looked at me for a second, then at them, and continued reading. I hereby transfer ownership of all assets, properties, and financial accounts to the Whitaker Family Education Trust, established in the name of my grandson, Matthew Whitaker, to be held in full until his 21st birthday. Silence, cold and heavy. Lisa blanked. What did you just say? Adams repeated the clause slowly. She turned red. That's ridiculous. He's 6 years old. You can't. Oh, he can, Adams interrupted, leaning back in his chair.
It's legally airtight. Everything has already been moved into the trust. Mark's face paled. Dad, you transferred it all? I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy he used to be, scared, small, and completely lost. I did what any father should do, I said, protected what matters. Lisa slammed her hands on the table and stood up. You selfish old. Careful, Adams warned, his voice cutting through the air. This conversation is recorded. She stormed out of the office, her heels clattering down the hall like a hammer on stone. Mark stayed, sitting quietly, unable to meet my eyes. Adams folded the papers neatly and smiled at me. That was satisfying, he said. I nodded, slow and calm. It wasn't revenge, I murmured. It was a lesson. When I stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit my face. I felt lighter, freer, as if 10 years of weight had lifted from my shoulders. I'd done what I had to do. I'd let them laugh, and in the end, the laughter turned on them. That was the bitter truth. Sometimes justice doesn't come from anger or shouting. It comes from silence, patience, and a pen in a trembling old hand. After the will reading, I sat on my porch for a long time, letting the quiet settle in. The wood creaked under my chair the same way it had for 30 years. The wind moved slow that evening, carrying the scent of pine and rain. Funny how peace can sound like nothing at all. But even in that stillness, my mind wandered backward through the years that carved me into the man I am now. When you're young, you believe love can fix anything. I met my wife, Eleanor, when I was 21. She was gentle, but had a spine made of steel. I was a teacher back then, making barely enough to fill our pantry, but she made every small thing feel big. Even burnt toast tasted like a feast when she smiled across the table. We raised Mark in that little farmhouse, teaching him to work hard, say thank you, and never turn your back on family. I thought those lessons would last him a lifetime. He was a good kid, bright and curious. Every Saturday morning, he'd follow me to the tool shed, trying to help me fix things. He used to say, "Dad, you can fix anything." I believed it too. But there's one thing no one can fix: time. It changes people, even when you're not looking. Mark went off to college in the city, the first Whitaker to ever do so. I was proud. I used to tell everyone at the diner, my boy's gonna be somebody. And he was, smart, ambitious, confident. But when he met Lisa, everything shifted. The first time he brought her home, I could tell she didn't belong in our world. She looked at our worn-out furniture and the peeling paint like it was beneath her. Eleanor tried to be kind, cooking her favorite meals, asking questions. Lisa smiled politely, but her eyes, those cold, sharp eyes, they never softened. After dinner, Eleanor whispered to me, "She's not the kind who builds a home, John. She's the kind who wants one ready-made." I laughed it off then. I thought my wife was being protective, maybe even jealous of losing her son's attention. But mothers know things men often miss. I should have listened. Years passed, and life started taking things away one by one. Eleanor got sick. It came slow at first, the kind of cough that doesn't go away. The doctor said it was lung fibrosis. I still remember the sound of the oxygen machine in our bedroom, the way it hummed like a tired lullaby. Mark visited less and less. "Work's been crazy, Dad," he'd say. Lisa never came. Not once. When Eleanor passed, I called Mark to tell him. He answered, silent for a few seconds, then said, "I'll try to make it by next weekend." He didn't. I buried my wife under the oak tree behind our house, the one she planted the year Mark was born. After the funeral, I sat there alone until sunset, staring at the fresh dirt, trying to make sense of how quiet the world had become. That night, I made a promise. I'd never beg for anyone's company again, not even my son's. Months went by. The house felt too big, too empty. I spent my days tending the garden, repairing old tools, and talking to Eleanor as if she were still there. Then one afternoon, a car I didn't recognize pulled up. Lisa stepped out first, dressed like she was going to a business meeting, not a family visit. Mark followed, looking uneasy. "Dad," Mark said, forcing a smile, "we thought we'd check on you." I looked at them both. "You mean she thought you should?" I replied. Lisa didn't flinch. "We just think it's time to start planning ahead," she said. "You're getting older. That house is too much for you. We can help with the paperwork, maybe sell it and move you somewhere more manageable." "Manageable," I repeated. "You mean smaller." "Safer," she corrected, tilting her head like she was talking to a child. "You could use the money, enjoy your retirement." I chuckled. "I have everything I need right here." Lisa sighed. "John, we're only thinking of what's best for you." I looked her dead in the eyes. "You're thinking of what's best for you. Don't confuse the two." Mark's jaw tightened. "Dad, she's just trying to help." "No, she's trying to take. There's a difference." They left angry that day, and for a while I didn't hear from them. Then came the letters. Offers from real estate agents I'd never contacted. Messages about potential buyers interested in rural property. I wasn't stupid. I knew who was behind it, but I let it go. I didn't confront them.
Soil, I just started keeping records, copies, proof. I learned long ago that when people show you who they are, it's better to write it down. A year later, I fell on the porch and cracked my ribs. It hurt like hell, but it hurt more to see how quick they used it against me. Lisa showed up at the hospital with fake concern in her eyes. "You need supervision, John," she said sweetly, "someone to make sure you're safe." Within a week, she and Mark had arranged for me to recover at a nursing facility 2 towns over. The place smelled of disinfectant and loneliness. They said it was temporary, just until I got better. But days turned into weeks. When I called home, nobody answered. When I asked to visit, Mark said the locks had been changed for security. That's when I knew. They weren't planning to bring me back. It broke something inside me. I'd worked my whole life for that home, for that land, for the family I thought would inherit it with gratitude. And here they were, erasing me while I was still alive. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. For a few nights, I even thought about giving up. Then one morning, I woke up before sunrise, sat by the window, and whispered to Eleanor, "I'm done being the fool." That same week, I called Mr. Adams. He visited me at the nursing home under the pretense of discussing insurance papers. We met in a quiet lounge near the garden. "You ready to change everything?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It's time I stopped rewarding greed." We spent hours rewriting my will. Every clause, every signature was deliberate. I made sure nothing could be twisted or contested. Adams looked at me, half smiling. "You sure you want to do this, John? It's a bold move." "I'm sure," I said. "Let them laugh when they read it. That'll make it sweeter." When I finally returned home, months later, the place didn't feel like mine anymore. The furniture was rearranged, the pictures of Eleanor replaced with paintings Lisa must have picked out. But one thing hadn't changed, the old oak tree out back. I walked straight to it, placed my hand on the bark, and whispered, "They don't know what's coming, love." Looking back now, I think that was the moment everything inside me shifted. I stopped being the heartbroken father and became the quiet planner. My age wasn't a weakness anymore. It was cover. They'd see wrinkles and trembling hands. They wouldn't see the storm behind them. The years broke me, yes, but they also built something stronger, patience. And patience, when mixed with truth, can bring down empires. It's strange how betrayal doesn't come all at once. It seeps in slow, like water through cracks in the wall. At first, you don't notice it. Then one morning you wake up, and the house you built no longer feels like home. That was how it happened to me. After I got back from the nursing home, Mark started visiting more often. Not out of love, out of guilt, or maybe suspicion. He'd walk through the rooms with his hands in his pockets, looking around like an appraiser instead of a son. "Dad, you sure you're doing okay on your own?" he'd ask. I'd nod, even though I knew what he really wanted to say. He wasn't worried about me falling. He was worried I'd still be standing. Lisa stopped pretending altogether. Every time she came over, her perfume filled the air before her words did. She'd move through the house as if she already owned it, touching things, making comments about how dated everything looked. "You could get a nice price for this place," she'd say. "It's big enough for a family, too big for one old man." I learned to stay quiet, to let her believe I was fading. The more harmless she thought I was, the bolder she became. That's how people like her work. They mistake silence for weakness. But silence, if you know how to use it, can be the sharpest blade of all. A few months passed. I noticed the little changes first. My mail started arriving already opened. My bank statements had marks on them. One morning I went to pay the property tax bill and found out someone had already done it, using my account. I called Mark. He acted surprised. "Oh, Lisa must have handled it," he said casually. "She's just helping out, Dad. You know how forgetful you get sometimes." Forgetful. That word stung more than I expected. It's what people call you when they want to take things without asking. They say it kindly at first, then it becomes a weapon. I didn't argue. I just smiled, thanked him, and hung up. That evening I called Mr. Adams again. "She's getting bold," I told him. "Good," he said. "Let her think she's winning. It'll make the ending cleaner." He came over a few days later with more papers, the final version of the will, the trust for my grandson, and a few other documents I wanted to keep private. I signed everything slowly, carefully, while Adams explained each clause. He drafted it perfectly. By the time we were done, the entire estate, the land, the savings, the house, even the insurance, was already under the Whitaker family trust. Nothing they could say or do would undo it. "Lock the originals in my safe," I said. He nodded. "And the copy?" I looked at the folded stack of papers in my hand. "This one stays here," I said. "Let them find it when they're ready to laugh." That was the last night I slept peacefully for a while. Because soon after, Lisa began pushing harder. She and Mark would show up unannounced, talking about plans. Sometimes she'd bring catalogs for home renovations. Other times she'd mention potential buyers, just in case. One Sunday afternoon, she came with a clipboard and a fake smile. "Dad, we found this lovely senior community," she said, handing me a brochure. "They have activities, meals, nurses on site. You'd love it." I looked at the picture on the front, old people in matching sweaters playing cards. "Looks nice," I said, "but I already have activities." She frowned. "Like what?" "Breathing," I said, "and minding my own business." Her smile dropped. "We're only trying to help you transition." "Transition?" I raised an eyebrow. "You make it sound like I'm dying." She shrugged. "We all are, aren't we?" That was the moment I realized she wasn't just greedy, she enjoyed the power. Some people don't want money for comfort. They want it to prove they can take it from someone else. That's what Lisa was after. Proof. Mark avoided eye contact most of the time. I could tell part of him still cared, but he was drowning under her influence. Every time he spoke, it sounded rehearsed. "Dad, she just wants what's best. You know she's organized." "Organized?" I said. "Yes, like a thief planning a clean getaway." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You're impossible." "No," I said quietly, "I'm patient." That shut him up. After they left, I checked the locks on my doors and moved the important documents to a metal box under the floorboards in my study. It's the same spot where Eleanor used to hide Christmas gifts. That little trapdoor had been our secret. She would have smiled to see it serve one last purpose. Then came the day I caught Lisa snooping. I was in the kitchen, pretending to do dishes, when I heard the faint sound of paper rustling from the study. I walked quietly down the hall. There she was, her back turned, drawers half open, her hands digging through folders. I leaned against the doorframe.
Lose something? I asked. She jumped, clutching a folder to her chest. Oh, John, you scared me. I was just looking for some old pictures of Mark. I smiled. You mean financial statements? Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Then she laughed, setting the folder down. You're so suspicious. No wonder Mark worries about you. Maybe he should, I said softly. She tried to recover, smiling again. You know, you could save everyone a lot of stress if you just let Mark manage your accounts. He's family. So am I said, but I don't touch his. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she picked up her purse and walked out. That was the last time she ever came into that room. From then on, I played the role of the tired old man perfectly. I let them see me forget things that didn't matter, mix up dates, pretend confusion. They thought they were winning. I let them think that. Because behind the scenes, Adams and I were setting the final stage, the meeting that would bring everything to light.
But fate has a way of adding one last twist to every story. A week before the will reading, Lisa showed up with a smile so wide it almost looked real. Big news, she said. Mark got promoted. We're buying a new house. We could really use the money from this place to cover the down payment. I nodded slowly. And what makes you think there'll be money for you to use? She tilted her head. Because, dear John, you love your son. You wouldn't let him struggle. I do love my son, I said. That's why I want him to learn. Her smile faltered. Learn what? That some lessons, I said, you don't teach with words. She didn't understand then, but she would. The night before the reading, I took out Eleanor's picture and set it on the table beside me. I told her everything, how they'd lied, stolen, tried to erase me. Tomorrow, I whispered, they'll see the truth. I'm not the fool they think I am. Her face in that picture looked proud, as if she were listening. Maybe she was. Maybe the dead stay near when justice is close. I like to think so. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The storm was ready and I was done waiting. They'd see what patience can do when it finally speaks. The morning of the will reading arrived like any other, but there was a kind of stillness in the air, the kind that happens before a heavy storm. I woke up early, long before the alarm clock would have rung if I still used one. The sun hadn't yet broken through the clouds, and the house was quiet, except for the creak of the old porch boards under my feet. I sat there for a while, watching the dew gather on the grass, feeling that strange mix of calm and ache that only age brings. Eleanor's picture sat on the table beside my coffee cup. I looked at it and whispered, "Today's the day." There was no reply, of course, but somehow the air felt less empty after I said it. By 9 o'clock, I was dressed in my best gray suit, the same one I wore at Mark's wedding all those years ago. It fit a little tighter around the waist now, and my hands trembled when I buttoned it, but it felt right to wear it. I wanted to remind them who I was before they started treating me like someone already gone. The lawyer's office was in town, just a 15-minute drive from my place. I got there early, as I always do, and found Mr. Adams already inside, organizing folders on his desk. He looked up as I entered and smiled. "You ready for this, John?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." He chuckled softly. "They have no idea what's coming, do they?" I shook my head. "None, and that's how it should be." He poured me a cup of coffee, no sugar, just the way I liked it, and we waited. They showed up 20 minutes late, walking in like they owned the place.
Soil, Lisa first, all sharp perfume and sharper expression, followed by Mark, whose tie was crooked and eyes tired. I wondered if he'd slept at all. Maybe his conscience had finally started whispering to him. Lisa didn't greet me. She never did. She just nodded to Adams and said, "Let's make this quick. We've got an appointment after this." Adams gave her a tight smile. "Oh, I'm sure you do." We sat down. The room smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. The walls were lined with certificates and framed pictures of Adams in his younger days, reminders of the time when things still made sense, when hard work meant something. Lisa crossed her legs, glanced at her watch, and sighed loudly. Mark kept shifting in his chair. Adams cleared his throat. "This reading concerns the last will and testament of Mr. John Whitaker, signed, sealed, and witnessed." He looked at me briefly, then continued. I'll begin. The sound of paper sliding echoed in the small office as he unfolded the first page. I, John Whitaker, being of sound mind and body, he began. Lisa laughed under her breath. Sound mind, right, she whispered to Mark, loud enough for me to hear. Mark didn't respond, but his lips twitched like he was trying not to smile. Adams kept reading. To my son, Mark Whitaker, and his wife, Lisa Whitaker, I leave my blessing, my memories, and my hope that they will remember that family is built on respect, not entitlement. Lisa blinked. Excuse me? Adams continued, unfazed. To my grandson, Matthew Whitaker, I leave my personal belongings, including my library, my watch, and my father's tools, to be given to him when he is old enough to appreciate them. Lisa leaned forward. Is there something missing? She asked, her voice cold. You haven't mentioned the property, the accounts. Adams lifted a hand. We're getting there. I stayed silent, my eyes fixed on the window. The sun had broken through now, golden light pouring into the room. It hit Lisa's face just right, making her squint. I couldn't help but think that even the light refused to look at her for too long. Adams turned to the second page, his voice steady. As for the remainder of my estate, including the Whitaker family home, all financial assets and any material possessions not otherwise listed, Lisa smiled wide. Finally, she said, glancing at Mark. See? Adams paused, looked down at the paper, and smiled slightly. That kind of smile only lawyers who've been waiting all day to drop a bomb can make. All such assets, he said, have been transferred into the Whitaker Family Education Trust established in the name of my grandson Matthew Whitaker, to be held in full until his 21st birthday. Silence.
You could have heard a pin drop on that polished floor. Lisa's mouth fell open. What? Adams repeated it slowly. Everything now belongs to the trust, irrevocably, legally sealed, and untouchable. Mark blinked, confused. Dad, you mean none of it's... I turned to him. It's all still in the family, son, just not in your hands. Lisa's face turned red. This is a joke, she snapped. You can't do this. Adams adjusted his glasses. I can assure you, Mrs. Whitaker, this is not a joke. Everything was filed months ago. The trust is active, the assets secured. Your son's name is on it. Yours is not. She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. You old man, you think you're clever. Careful, Adams interrupted, his tone sharp. This conversation is recorded. You might want to reconsider how you address the executor. She froze, eyes narrowing. Mark rubbed his temples. Lisa, sit down. No, I will not, she hissed. Do you have any idea what this means for us, for me? We've been paying bills, taking care of his affairs, and this is how he repays us? I let her finish, then said quietly, You didn't take care of me, Lisa. You took from me. There's a difference. Her jaw clenched. You can't even prove that. I smiled faintly. I don't have to. You already did. Mark looked between us, lost and pale. Dad, why? Why would you do this? I turned to him, feeling the weight of years pressing on my chest. Because I raised you better than this, Mark. I thought you'd grow into a man who values people over property. But somewhere along the line, you let greed rewrite who you are. He dropped his gaze, silent. Lisa scoffed. Oh, please, don't turn this into a morality lesson. You're just bitter because we're young and you're... Old? I said softly. Yes, and that's exactly why I see through you. Adams folded the papers neatly. That concludes the reading, he said, but his tone held a touch of satisfaction. Mr. Whitaker, everything has been executed as you instructed. Lisa grabbed her purse and stormed out, her heels slamming against the hallway floor. Mark sat there for a long time, staring at his hands. He finally looked up at me. Dad, she's angry, but maybe we can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said. You'll understand someday when your own son grows up. You'll want him to remember you for what you gave him that mattered, not the things that didn't. He said nothing. When he finally stood, his shoulders slumped. I hope you're happy, he muttered. I looked at him as he walked away. I'm not happy, I said softly, but I am at peace.
After they left, Adams chuckled quietly. You know, in my 30 years of practice, I've never seen a clause land like that.
Soil, the look on her face was priceless. I gave a small smile. It wasn't for her, I said. It was for him, so he'd remember who he used to be. Adams nodded. Still, John, that was something. When I stepped outside, the sky had cleared completely. The air smelled of rain on warm pavement. I walked to my truck, slowly, the cane tapping in rhythm with my steps. I felt lighter, not because I'd won anything, but because I'd finally let go. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the quiet dignity of a man who refuses to break. That day, I didn't just teach them a lesson. I reminded myself that silence can be a victory all its own. The drive home after the will reading felt longer than it should have. The sky was painted gold with streaks of gray clouds, the kind that always make me think of Eleanor. I drove with one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on my knee, feeling the weight of years pressed into my bones. I wasn't angry anymore, not at Mark, not even at Lisa. I was tired, but in the way a man feels after finishing hard labor, aching but content that the job is finally done. When I got home, the porch light flickered on as if it knew I'd returned. The wind carried the scent of cut grass and distant rain. I walked up the steps, my knees protesting every movement, and sat down on the old chair Eleanor bought at a yard sale 30 years ago. The seat had grooves from where we used to sit together, talking about everything and nothing. I ran my fingers along the wood and whispered, "It's done, love. They know now." The crickets started their evening song, soft and steady. For the first time in years, I felt peace. But peace has a way of stirring memories, and those memories pull you backward, whether you want them to or not. When Mark was 12, I taught him how to ride a bike. He fell a dozen times, scraped his knees, and kept saying he wanted to quit. I told him, "Son, it's not about staying up. It's about learning how to get back up." He smiled through the pain then, and I thought that lesson had stuck. Maybe it had once, before the years and the money and Lisa's voice changed everything. It's easy to blame her, easier than admitting that somewhere along the way, I failed to teach him how to see through people like her. Maybe I gave him too much, or maybe not enough. Those thoughts circle me sometimes like ghosts, whispering that maybe all this was my fault. I was still sitting there when I saw headlights approaching down the gravel road. I knew the sound of that car, Mark's silver sedan. I didn't move, I just waited. He parked crookedly and got out, his steps uncertain. He stood at the edge of the porch for a long time before speaking. "Dad," he said finally, "we need to talk." "Then sit," I replied. He climbed the steps and sat in the chair opposite mine. For a while, neither of us said anything. The air between us felt thick, like something alive. "You embarrassed us today," he said quietly. I smiled faintly. "I told the truth. If that embarrasses you, maybe you should ask yourself why." He sighed. "Lisa's furious. She says you've destroyed everything we've worked for." "Worked for?" I turned to him. "You mean everything I worked for." He flinched, but didn't answer. "Mark," I said softly, "when your mother and I built this place, we didn't do it for money. We did it so you'd have something steady in a world that's always moving. You were supposed to protect that, not sell it off like a spare car." He stared at the porch floor. "You don't understand. Things are different now. It's not like when you were young." I leaned forward. "No, son, it's exactly like when I was young. People still choose between doing what's right and doing what's easy. You just chose easy." He looked up then, his eyes red-rimmed. "You think I'm like her. I think you let her become louder than your conscience." He opened his mouth to argue, but couldn't. The words just didn't come. "Do you know why I left everything to Matthew?" I asked. He shook his head. "Because he still believes in kindness. Because I see in him what I used to see in you. And because if I'd left it in your hands, she'd have taken it all before he turned 10. Mark's eyes flickered with pain. He stood up, pacing the porch. "You don't know her like I do." "I know enough," I said.
I know she treats you like a paycheck, not a husband. That's not true. I raised my voice just a little. Isn't it? Then tell me, Mark, when was the last time she held your hand without looking at her watch? He froze, his chest rising and falling fast. I watched the realization hit him, the way truth always does, not like a thunderclap, but like a slow knife pressing in. He sat back down, quieter now. You think I can't change, he said. I think you can, I replied, but I also think you won't until you lose something that matters. He looked out over the fields, the same fields he'd played in as a child. I just wanted to make her happy, he said softly. You can't build happiness on someone else's tears, I said. That kind of joy always cracks. The silence that followed was long, heavy, and filled with the sounds of crickets and wind. Finally, he spoke again, his voice small. So, what happens now? Now, I said, you start over. You earn back what you lost, not the money, the respect. He didn't answer, just nodded slowly. After a moment, he stood and walked down the steps.
I'll call you, he said. I'll be here, I replied. He hesitated, then turned back. You really think Matthew will be different? I know he will, I said, because I'll make sure of it. When he drove away, I watched the taillights disappear into the dark. I didn't feel triumph or victory, only a quiet ache. Maybe that's the curse of being a parent. Even when your child betrays you, some part of you still hopes he finds his way home. The next day, I went into town. Word travels fast in small places, and people had already heard about the reading. At the diner, old friends nodded approvingly. About time someone stood up to that woman, one of them said. I smiled but said nothing. Justice isn't about applause, it's about balance. Later that afternoon, Mr. Adams stopped by the house. He stood on the porch holding an envelope. From the trust office, he said. Everything's finalized. The funds are secured. Thank you, I said, for everything. He nodded. I've got to say, John, I've handled a lot of estate cases, but this one's special. You didn't just settle scores, you taught a lesson. That was the idea, I said. Lessons last longer than money. Before he left, he looked at me with a kind of admiration. You think they'll ever forgive you? I took a long breath. Maybe someday. But forgiveness isn't what I wanted. Understanding. When he drove off, I sat back down on the porch, the same spot as always. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak tree where Eleanor was buried. I could almost hear her laugh. She told me once that family is like glass, beautiful, fragile, and sharp when broken. I used to think she meant it as a warning. Now I see it was a truth. As the sun set, painting the fields in orange and purple, I whispered, "They'll remember this, love. Maybe not today, but one day. When the noise fades and the greed quiets down, they'll remember who they came from." I leaned back, closed my eyes, and listened to the world exhale around me. Justice had been served, not loudly, not cruelly, but cleanly, like the closing of a well-written story, the kind of ending only silence can deliver. It's been 6 months since the will reading. The seasons have changed again, and so have I. The trees out front have begun to lose their color, the fields fading into shades of amber and brown. Every morning, I sit here on my porch with a cup of coffee and the soft sound of wind brushing through the leaves. The same porch where I've watched decades of sunrises, where Eleanor and I once planned our whole lives. Time still moves forward, even when you think your story is done. Mark hasn't been around much. I expected that. After everything that happened, I figured he'd need time to face himself. Soil, I did get a letter from him a few weeks back, handwritten, which surprised me. The first few lines were clumsy, full of apologies he probably didn't know how to say aloud. He told me he and Lisa had separated. He didn't go into detail, but I didn't need him to. I could already picture it, her anger, her pride, the moment she realized the money she chased was gone for good. The kind of silence that follows when someone like her loses power is the only real truth they ever hear. He ended the letter with a single line that I'll never forget. "Dad, I understand now." Those words meant more than any inheritance could. They told me that somewhere under all the layers of pride and pain, the boy I raised was still there. I folded that letter and put it in the box with Eleanor's things, her wedding ring, our photographs, the dried rose she pressed between the pages of her Bible. I keep them together because they all belong to the same kind of memory, the kind that makes a man feel alive, even when the years try to make him small. The days have settled into a rhythm again. I wake early, feed the birds, water the garden, and take long walks down the gravel road that runs behind the property. People in town still ask about the famous Will story. They smile when they see me, half proud, half curious. I just nod and say, "It's over now," because it is. What came before doesn't need retelling every time. It just needs to be remembered. Sometimes I still talk to Eleanor. I know how that sounds, an old man speaking to the wind, but it helps. When I stand by the oak tree where she rests, I tell her about our grandson, about how he's growing fast, and how I set up a small scholarship fund in his name. I tell her how I hope he'll love books, how maybe one day he'll sit where I sit and understand why I did what I did. One evening, not long ago, I heard footsteps on the porch, the kind of hesitant steps that belong to someone who doesn't know if they're welcome. I looked up, and there was Mark, standing just beyond the railing, holding something behind his back. He looked older, not in years, but in spirit. His eyes were softer, humbler. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. "You never have to ask," I said. He stepped up and handed me a small frame. Inside, it was a picture of the three of us, me, him, and Eleanor, taken the summer before she got sick. We were laughing, covered in paint from fixing the fence. I hadn't seen that picture in years. "I found it in one of Mom's old albums," he said quietly. "Thought you should have it." I held it in my hands for a long moment, feeling the weight of it. "Thank you, son." He sat down beside me, and for a while, we said nothing. The sky was turning orange, the kind of color that makes you wish you could freeze a moment forever.
"I left her," he said finally. "I know," I replied. "She wasn't who I thought she was." "She was exactly who I thought she was," I said softly. "You just see it now." He nodded, staring out at the horizon. "I've been working at the firm again, trying to fix things. I'm not asking for anything, Dad. I just wanted you to know." "I know," I said again, and this time I reached over and patted his shoulder. "You're fixing more than you realize." He looked at me then, really looked. "You're not angry." "Angry?" I shook my head. "Son, anger's a young man's game. I've lived long enough to know it doesn't build anything. It only burns. I wanted you to learn, and you did." He swallowed hard. "You taught me the hard way." "The only way that lasts," I said. We stayed like that until the stars began to show. For the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated. "Can I come by next weekend? Maybe bring Matthew?" I smiled. "You'd better." After he drove off, I sat there a while longer. The porch light buzzed softly, and the night air carried the smell of rain again. I looked out over the fields and thought about all the stories these old boards had heard. Laughter, arguments, confessions, prayers. Every one of them part of the same long song. You spend a lifetime trying to build something worth leaving behind. But in the end, it isn't the house, or the land, or even the money. It's the lesson, the piece of truth that outlives you. That night, before I went to bed, I took out my old journal and wrote one final note. If you ever want to know who you really are, listen to what your silence says when the laughter fades. I closed it, set it on the table, and turned off the light. Now, every morning when the sun rises, I sit out here with my coffee, feeling Eleanor beside me in the wind, and I smile. Because peace isn't something you're given, it's something you earn, one hard lesson at a time. And from this porch, with all I've seen and all I've lost, I can finally say, I earned mine.